We have all heard of termites. Termites inhabit 6 of the 7 continents. Antarctica is the only termite-free place on Earth. These are little insects that eat wood. But they're not the only little insect that eats wood. That's what we're going to talk about in episode 73, Bugs in the Bedpost. 7 other critters that can make your life as a professional woodworker difficult. Hi, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast. I'm here to help you, the skilled amateur, take it to the next step. Hang out a shingle, go into business, help your community solve their woodworking problems. This could be furniture repair, this could be building cabinets or desks, all kinds of different things. And you don't have to be a master woodworker to do this. If you know more than your customer, boom, you're halfway there. So listen to this podcast. I've provided a lot of, I think, great information that should be able to help you become a professional woodworker, or if you're already down this journey, help you become more efficient and more profitable. So today we're going to talk about bugs. Creepy crawly things. I had a lady bring me a grain bin, a Midwest grain bin. This is something they used to use, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. We are blessed in this area of the Midwest United States with huge sycamore trees. I mean, these things very commonly grew to be 4, 5, 6 feet in diameter. Huge trees. And these were harvested. A lot of the wood went into barns, into homes, into furniture. And some people would take and just simply cut these trees, find a hollow one that really couldn't be used for any of those other things, but they would hollow this thing all the way out, leaving maybe 2 inches of wall thickness, and turn that into a storage bin. Most often for grain. It was a nature-provided storage container. Well, I had a customer who grandfather's old farm was finally going to be sold. And there were 2 of these grain bins. Now, this one was about 34 inches wide and about 36 inches tall. Honestly, wasn't that heavy. Of course, being 200 years old probably meant that it was very dry. So she wanted to give one of the grain bins that was in better shape to the local historical society. The other grain bin that was kind of rough, she wanted to turn into something for the home. And she was kind of thinking about a coffee table. Yes, we could do that. The only problem is that I needed to cut that top square to the sides because there was a slight taper and some type of decorative feet. Well, in the process of doing all this, I found bugs. I mean, you could obviously see that there had been an infestation at one time because there's all these little tiny holes. So I wasn't terribly surprised whenever I did find bugs. So I finished the piece for her, and I told her about the bugs. What do I do with it? And to be honest, I didn't have a good answer. So that kind of led me down this rabbit hole that I've spent a couple weeks in. I'm going to bring you what I found out and some suggestions that I gave to her, and perhaps you could use these also. So what kind of bugs are we talking about? If you've been around furniture, if you've been around woodworking for very long at all, you've probably heard of the powder post beetle. That seems to be the most common in our area of the U.S. Its scientific name is Lactididi. It's about 1/4 inch long and in the adult form. And it's just one of, I think, 7 that I had mentioned. There's the common furniture beetle. It's fairly large. It's about 5/8 of an inch long. And it has a very distinctive head shape. Now, all of these bugs are arthropods. They have an exoskeleton. We have an internal skeleton, an endoskeleton. But these exoskeletons are divided into 3 segments: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The head of the common furniture beetle kind of looks like Darth Vader's helmet, or maybe a World War II German helmet. It's very distinctive. There's also the old house borer beetle. That seems to be maybe more prevalent in Europe or England than in the U.S. There's the false powder post beetle. Okay. The death watch beetle. That's a fun one. And the long-horned beetle. And the one that you may not even know about, but the ambrosia beetle. And we'll see this in maple. You might go to your wood supplier and they have a stack of ambrosia maple. Well, ambrosia maple is not a species of maple, but rather it's the effect of the ambrosia beetle getting in there, and it discolors the wood very beautifully in some people's eyes, and you can charge top dollar for insects damaged wood. It's kind of like spalted maple. That's not a species. That is rotting maple. And you can charge absolutely top dollar for that. People will pay big bucks for, well, rotting wood. You might not want to use the term rotting or insect damaged wood, but just tell them it's spalted wood or ambrosia maple. And there you go. And of course we have the termite. And there are several different types of termites throughout the world. I'm not going to go into termites in this episode. The website that I found most useful was DIYpestcontrol.com, link in the show notes. They did a really, really good job of showing the different species, really good photos, identifying characteristics, and the exit holes that they leave. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. This is a huge problem. Wood-eating insects. And we're going to confine our discussion to furniture, but all of the aforementioned bugs will eat your home or your shop or your barn. It's not exclusive to furniture. So a powder post beetle you could find anywhere. And what most people will end up talking about is woodworms. Oh, my house is infected with woodworms. That differentiates it from termites, because termites kind of look like a woodworm, but that's the actual insect itself. They're white. They kind of have a brownish head. They have these great big mandibles that that can eat through wood. So these woodworms is actually the larvae of the aforementioned species. And if we dust off our freshman biology etymology lessons, we remember the life cycle of most insects. You have the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the adult. It's the larva of these bugs that really do the damage. They're just little tiny eating machines, and they will just start eating through all of the sapwood in that particular piece of wood. They don't generally go into heartwood because it doesn't have the same carbohydrate density that the sapwood has, and that's what they're after. They're after the sugars. They're just addicted to sugar. That's their diet. They find that in the sapwood, and these life cycles can vary between 1 and 3 years. As the larval stage ends, they'll go into the pupa stage. That's where the cocoon or the chrysalis is formed, and they mature into an adult. Now the adult starts eating its way out because it wants to find the surface of the wood. And when it breaks through, it leaves that little pinhole. And we can kind of tell what type of insect had been doing this by the size of that pinhole. And it's for a powder post beetle, it could be, a 32nd of an inch up to about 1/8 of an inch. For the old house beetle, it's about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch. So they're very visible. And if you've been around wood for very long, I know that you've seen these. And sometimes you might actually be able to hear them. I can just imagine an entire industry springing up over insect detection stethoscopes or microphones, and you can just see the craziness that could evolve from that. Not really, but usually the easiest way to see if you have an active infestation is by their frass. Frass is a funny word for the little bits of sawdust and, well, excrement that they push out of these holes. And you'll see this little pile of sawdust down under, great-grandmother's rocking chair. And yeah, that's probably an active infestation. Or you are dusting and you pick up the old jewelry box and you see this sawdust, this wood powder, this whitish stuff. Yeah, that's probably an active infestation. Now, the thing is not something to really panic over because these are very slow moving insects. It's going to take, well, in the case of this grain bin, literally hundreds of years for that to develop. You don't need to panic and, start locking all the doors, evacuating the people, get the dog out of there. It's not that type of thing. Termites, which are the most destructive of the wood-eating insects, are not that destructive. I mean, it takes years for that insect damage to really accumulate. But you need to determine if you have an active infestation or an inactive infestation. So somebody brings you the rocking chair and you see all these little, we typically call them pinholes. They're a 1/16 of an inch in diameter and they're all over this one area of the rocking chair. Maybe it's the back rung or something like that. And what do we do with this? This is your job as a furniture restorer, furniture repair, to make a determination. What action do we need to take? We got to be a little careful with this because somebody may have cleaned up, any of the signs of an active infestation. So it really doesn't hurt to leave that sitting in the shop for, a couple weeks or so, undisturbed, to see if anything is coming out of those. Now, be on the lookout for finishing techniques that mimic what they used to call fly holes. And there was a period in the U.S., I don't know, late 60s, early 70s. That's when I was a kid and I saw furniture like this. They would call it fly specked. And it was a technique where they would use a multiple layer of glaze on a piece of furniture. And like in the middle of these glazes, they would take a dry paintbrush or varnish brush and dip it into a dark glaze or a dark stain and hold it vertically 90 degrees to the piece of wood and draw a piece of wood against those bristles. And what would happen is the bristles would snap forward and a little bit of that stain would form a drop and get flung onto the piece. Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre, finishing technique, but it was like all the rage. It was called fly speck, which you can also, that's basically fly excrement, which I don't know why anybody would want to see that, but they were trying to mimic these wormholes in a piece of wood because, that's old. It's got to, that's got to be good. Antique dealers would get all excited whenever they would buy a piece of wood because it had these wormholes in it. And, this is a really old piece. Well, if there's a lot of wormholes, yeah, maybe. It just means that there was an active infestation there. could still be an active infestation there. Just because you're buying it from an antique dealer doesn't mean that you're not also buying the bugs that are inside. So how does this affect us? Furniture repair, furniture refinishing people. If you are working on a piece of furniture and you find bugs, do you want to return that to the customer without notifying them? Yeah, if they didn't know that it had bugs, you could return it and they would be none the wiser. But, is that a good call? That's kind of up to you. I would not want to do that myself. I would want to notify them. And you can treat these bugs and, of course, charge for that service. This also affects us when we acquire wood that is not kiln dried from a lumber dealer. If we go to an auction and there's a stack of wood, and I've been to auctions, really nice wood, evidence of powder post beetle, and I would pass. I would not even bid on it. Widow wood, when a craftsman passes away and their widower, needs to get rid of this stuff, you might be buying some bugs with that too. Donated wood, somebody just has wood that, they drop off into your driveway and you hear squealing tires, in the middle of the night. It happens. So you need to educate yourself and be aware of this. And the last thing you want to do is to bring some wood into your shop or into your wood storage barn and have that infect all of your other stock. Now, kiln-dried wood that's gone through a kiln, has been brought up to 140 degrees or 160 degrees, whatever the schedule, for that particular species is. Those bugs are gone. They're dead. And also, there's strong resistance against future infestation because that wood has literally been baked. And those carbohydrates, my understanding is they chemically change. So it's not as appetizing to that. But I have passed a lot of auction wood that was buggy. I just did not want to deal with it because, well, honestly, I wasn't very knowledgeable on the treatment of infected wood. So how do you treat this? Well, old school, I grabbed my copy of The Furniture Doctor, George Grotz, Grotz, published 1962. Wonderful book, very pleasantly written, easy read, ton of old school knowledge. And I looked up wormwood, and he had about a half a page on what to do with this. He suggested the chemical copronol, which is a copper naphthenate. I am not a chemist, as you can tell, but it's basically a copper solution that he said either coat it 3 times or submerge it for 3 minutes. Okay, I can remember my stepdad using this product for many different things, and I remember him always wearing these great big heavy rubber gloves, and I could not be around. I had to vacate the property and our shop, and he eventually stopped using it because apparently it's rather, toxic. It's copper in a liquid form. Copper is a unique chemical when it comes to living organisms. They generally don't get along well. In the marine industry, we have a problem with barnacles and shipworms. And these are a wood-boring mollusk that will literally eat themselves into a wood ship and, render it useless. I mean, ships have literally sunk because of these wood-boring worms. The Spanish Armada, which was sailing up the English Channel to invade England in Queen Elizabeth's reign, that would have been the first, 1620, someplace in there. they hit a gale and they all sunk. And they later figured out that the reason that the entire fleet was wiped out was that there was a massive infestation of these worms. So, sorry, tangent. We generally don't use this copper anymore. Now, I did a Google search. Of course, Google knows everything. And the Corpronel woodworm killer is available. It seems only in England. I couldn't find a U.S. source for it. And it uses a chemical called, methylethylethoxy, propanol. I had no idea what that word's. I butchered it horribly. You can look it up, and it says to brush on 3 coats or to submerge for 3 minutes. I don't think that that's copper, but that's a great big long scary chemical word, so I'm rather leery of it. We do still use copper in treatment for termites. There's the tino-copper nimethylate, which is 17%, 2% is metal in 1 gallon. It's a preservative you can buy on Amazon for $62 a gallon. These are used primarily in new construction or remodeling where there may have been a termite infestation, and a contractor can go through and this is, I think, the green solution, and you can spray that on all of either the affected wood or even new wood that you put in to guard against future damage. If you hire a pest control professional, they are very likely will use that exact same solution. Another old school technique was fumigating, and stories that I heard growing up was one of the popular things to do is to take some plastic, wrap the wood, the infected wood, the chair, whatever, in plastic, make like a tent for it, and then hook the tent up to your lawnmower, start the lawnmower, and let it run for a couple hours. And that carbon monoxide would flood into your makeshift tent, and, well, it would kill the little buggers. Professionals would have fumigation chambers. These were built rooms that they could inject some type of a chemical into it, and it may have been carbon monoxide, I don't know, and they would fumigate the furniture or the stack of wood inside of this chamber on a very professional, commercial, type basis. I talked to a couple professional insect pest control people, and apparently fumigating is very, very old school, and in my state they don't even do it anymore. That's old technology with some of these other chemicals that they can mix up into a low pressure sprayer and just go spray around. Apparently that's much more effective and much less toxic than what they used to use. And again, if you have a kiln nearby and you have purchased some auction wood, you could take and have them fumigate that for you. I don't know if this would work in a vacuum kiln. I would think that it probably would. And the other thing that happens is that this has to be relatively wet wood. The moisture content needs to be pretty high for these wood-boring insects to be really happy and hungry. And couple different sources I read said anywhere, like under 25%, they're not as attractive. Under 20%, you're starting to get into the safe zone. 6%, which on some parts of the country is not obtainable. There's no risk of insect damage. So that would be another thing to keep in mind. Modern treatments, one word, borax, boric acid. This is a substance known by many different names. There's sodium borate, there's sodium tetraborate, there's disodium tetraborate. And it's basically a combination of boron, sodium, and oxygen. And you may be using boric acid or borax right now. It's widely used in households. We actually mix up a laundry detergent using borax, 20 Mule Team laundry powders. And it can be mixed up and used as a cleaning agent. There's a food grade boric acid that is used in some different foods. It has a pH of 9, which is getting on that basic side of the pH scale. Not to be confused, but rather related to sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, which we use as a leavening agent in breads and pastries and things. That has a pH of 8, and good old table salt, sodium chloride, has a pH of 7. So that's a true natural salt. The borax is a salt, and again, not a chemist, but we can kind of see where we're going here. There's commercial anti-bug products that you can purchase. One of the more prevalent ones is called Boracare. This is a concentrated solution, about $90 a gallon on Amazon, that you mix at a 1-to-1 ratio with water up to a 1-to-5 ratio with water, depending on what you're treating and how you're treating it. It's apparently it's mixed with glycerin, and it penetrates into wood fibers very, very deeply. There's also the Timbor Professional Insecticide and Fungicide. It's sold in a 1.5 pound bag at Amazon for $15. This powder you mix with water and then either brush or spray on. Several references to that. There's a company called Wood Care Systems out in Washington State. They have a full list of different products used for wood-boring insects. This could be from termites to powder post beetles to the death watch beetle. And they also list on their website end rot kit. Now, I've used this in the repair of boats, and any marine store you would be able to purchase the end rot kit. It's a little cardboard box that says end rot on it, and it has a penetrating epoxy, a 2-part you mix up that penetrates into the wood. This is used a lot with dry rot damage. It also uses a product called Board Defense, and it comes in a little packet. You open that up, it's a powder, you mix it with water, and you brush it onto the affected area. Guess what that is? You're right, boric acid, borax. This kit also includes borate rods. Now that's spelled B-O-R, the numeral 8, R-O-D-S. And I've used these on window repair where it might be something where I couldn't get it out of I couldn't remove it to bring it back to the shop to work on it. But it was kind of almost an emergency repair, and I knew that there was rod in, and these borate rods are cool because they're different sizes. The ones I had were about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, a couple inches long, and you drill a hole into the dry rotted wood and insert this in, and I believe you then use the board defense on top of that, and when that was all dry, then you saturated everything with epoxy, and it also came with an epoxy putty that you could then rebuild the structure of that wood. That's one way of going. Anytime I'm repairing wood like that, I like to remove as much of the damaged wood as possible. This was a position where I really couldn't do that. This was a marvelous solution for that particular problem. And like I said, this is used in boats all the time. The idea of the borate rods means that boric acid is contained within that rod, and it's a slow release leaching. So it's going to provide a long-term protection in that particular structure. It was also interesting to find that the people who are really, really good at this are utility companies. who have telephone poles made out of wood, utility poles made out of wood. They are really concerned about protecting that wood from wood-boring insects, whether that's termites or powder post beetles, etc. And I found several research papers that talked about the effectiveness of the embedded borate rods in the telephone poles. And they would drill a hole, insert the rods, and then use a plug that was saturated in either the borate or into the copper solutions and seal that up. And that provided long-term, like 20, 30, 40-year protection of that piece of wood against all these nasty critters. Now, when you do your research on this, which I very much hope that you do, any of these products, you want to look at the MSDS, the manufacturer's safety data sheet, or just the safety data sheet. That's how I figured out that the Corpronol woodworm killer contained that great big long chemical that I cannot pronounce. It's right there on the safety data sheet. And all these other products I looked at contained boric acid, borax, or any of the various names that they would use for the same thing. Now, all of these treatments are designed for raw wood. So your great-grandmother's rocking chair that still has a finish on it, yeah, technically that's going to need to be sanded, stripped down to bare wood. Now, all of these products you can then refinish on top of after those salts have dried. The one termite technician that I talked to said that, give it a day, 2 days, 3 days. He says, because what will happen is that those salts will kind of accumulate on the surface and you'll need to brush those off. And then you can just go right ahead and refinish over top of it. He also warned that sometimes you need to do this 2 or 3 times. If you have a really big piece of wood, you're going to have to do it 3 times. If it's a small piece of wood, 1 application may be all that it needs. You might also consider using one of those borate rods to give that some long-term protection. Now, the other thing to really kind of emphasize is some type of a sealer. Since these borate treatments will not penetrate a finish, well, that kind of also leads to that the adult powder post beetle cannot penetrate the finish, because what they do is once that adult emerges from the wood, leaves that little hole, he goes flying off looking for a mate and laying new eggs. And they'll land on a piece of wood. I guess that they analyze it to see if it has suitable carbohydrate density, and then they will find a little crack and lay the eggs in that little crack. And the eggs hatch and the larvae start boring into the wood and start their life cycle. Like I said, some of these are between 1 and 3 years long. So if you finish the wood, that is real good protection against the adult wood-eating insect, which kind of begs the question, if I make a nice, let's say, cherry dining room table and the customer wanted some sapwood because they like the contrasting colors in cherry, should I finish the bottom, the underside of the table? My answer would be yes, if you are at all concerned about wood-boring insects. Very typically, the underside is not finished. In fact, way back in the old days, a customer would get mad at you, accusing you of ripping them off if you finished the backside of the chest of drawers, because nobody's going to see that. That's a waste of money, so on and so forth. But here, this might actually be a good thing to apply that finish all the way around that piece of furniture to protect it from insects. That might be why we see some of the evidence of an insect infestation in old antiques, very often in the unfinished areas. So just kind of a theory there. So that should give you some good ideas on how to treat wood boring insects. You could purchase, any of the products that we talked about today. I'm very tempted just to grab my box of borax, 20 mule team, and it's sodium tetraborate didecahydrate. Mix it up with a little bit of water and brush that on. That should work. It may not be as fancy as the store-bought stuff, but that should work. I'd probably want to do some experiments. And again, whenever you're treating this with the boric acid, it might take more than one application, and you're going to have to see if that first application got the little buggers or if there's still indications. I would imagine what you could do with a customer, if you're reasonably sure that you got them, but tell the customer, keep an eye on this. If you see any frass, call me, bring it back, and we'll do it again. That would be a good solution to that. Now, recommendations to do your research, the DIYpestcontrol.com would be a good place to start. Excellent photos. ewoodcare.com has products, some good information. There's a YouTube video that I included made by Matt Riesener. You remember he's a building contractor down in Texas. Texas knows all about wood boring insects. I mean, they have, like the smorgasbord of wood boring insects. He talks about using the timber bore on a new construction project and how they applied this themselves. They didn't hire a pest control company to come in and do this. Past inspection, everything. A good video. He provides some good information. And there's another link in the show notes about BoraCare that includes the MSDS information. Missed jobs. I got an email. We are looking to have a kitchen table and U-shaped banquet benches, 3 separate benches, made for a dining nook. The space we are working with measures 48 inches by 110 inches. We would like the table to be 40 inches wide and have the length that fit comfortably with the corners. If this is a project you are willing to accept, approximately how long would it take to build and how much would it cost to finish? Thank you for your help. So this was a very good email. I don't suspect that this was spam. Notice that they asked, is this a project you're willing to do? That was their first question. Then they asked approximately how long would it take to build? And the third question was approximately how much would this cost? So that's real good information. They gave you measurements in there. You could actually, kind of off the cuff, do a quick little spreadsheet, build list and come up with a rough range of pricing. I rarely give an exact number. I'll say between, $500 and $1,000. That's the range that this could go. I don't know if they want to make it out of plywood or solid maple. Those are details that they've left out, but that could give you some type of a range. And don't be, just because they asked for this, don't be locked in that you have to provide something now. You may want more information. You may want to see pictures of the space. You may want to go and look at the space and go through that, which if you missed the last episode, number 72, the design process, we talk about that, how to actually go about doing this type of job. And I'm still way backed up and I politely declined. It sounds like a fun project. This is a project that you can probably make some money at and gain some valuable skills while doing. Which brings me to, okay, I'm going to beg. I need your ideas for upcoming episodes. I don't have to use your name. I don't have to use your country or anything like that. I just need questions. You guys have been pretty good about providing those in the past, but it's kind of slacked off. I know it's spring, we're going into summer. We're all busy. But, if there's something that you've come across, you're not real sure, please shoot me an email. Text message, just let me know what's on your mind. And I'm going to give you a challenge question. I thought of this the other day in the shower. What gives you the biggest challenge operating a small woodworking business? Is it your skills that you have or don't have? Is it the resources? Or is it finances? So your skills, is there something that you really would like to do, but you just don't know how to do that? You don't have skills of, marquetry or veneer work, trim carpentry. What is the skill that's really kind of challenging you right now? Your resources. Is there typically a lack of resources? It could be tools. You've been getting by on consumer grade tools at the big box shop, although they do carry really good tools. Maybe you need to upgrade your table saw, or you'd like to buy a bandsaw, or your track saw is subpar, whatever that might be. Or is it more finances? I don't have work coming in fast enough, which you could also rephrase, I don't get work fast enough to generate a good cash flow. Maybe you're not getting work done fast enough because you don't have the skills yet to get that work done in a real timely manner. So, what is the thing that's kind of challenging you there? Shoot me an email, a text. You could literally say 1, 2, 3, skills, resources, or finances, and kind of an informal pool, so to speak. Special thanks to listeners in Timonium, Maryland, USA, and also in Bury St. Edmunds, Suffolk, England, and the one listener in, I'm not going to say this right, Tretec, Slovenia. I'm sorry. I am horrible with pronunciations, but really appreciate you listening. Affiliate links, I have for Taylor Tools, Unitel Voice, if you're looking for, some way of managing your personal cell phone and your business at the same time. I'm still open for coaching. I have a few time slots there. If there's a problem that you would like to get a little bit more detail, dive a little bit deeper in there, I would be happy to help you. And remember, you can always support this podcast by buying me a coffee. Links right there on the homepage or in the show notes, and greatly appreciate your support. So until next episode, happy woodworking.